My dad held me down while my stepmother carved her initials into my arm with a kitchen knife, but what happened changed everything. "Don't move, Claire," my stepmother Simone shrieked, the serrated kitchen knife trembling in her hand. "She needs to understand who runs this household." I twisted desperately against my father's iron grip, his calloused hands crushing my wrists against the cold granite countertop. "Dad, please, make her stop." My voice cracked with terror. "You should have considered that before you disrespected your stepmother," he said, his tone flat and emotionless as he pressed my forearm flat. Simone brought the blade closer, her eyes wild with rage. "Now everyone who sees you will know exactly who you belong to." My dad held me down while my stepmother carved her initials into my arm with a kitchen knife. "My name is Claire Hammond, and I'm 22 years old. This story begins when I was 16, living in what should have been my safe haven in Riverside, California, but instead felt like a prison with invisible bars. My mom, Catherine, died when I was 13. Ovarian cancer. It ravaged her body in 8 brutal months, taking her from marathon runner to bedridden in what felt like a heartbeat. Watching her fade destroyed my father, Gerald. For an entire year after we buried her, he moved through life like a ghost, going to his job at the aerospace plant, coming home, microwaving dinner, and staring at the television without really seeing it. I was drowning in my own grief, but I also watched helplessly as my father disappeared into his. Then Simone Caldwell entered our lives. She was a bartender at Hank's Steakhouse, the place Dad started frequenting every Thursday after work. She was 34 to his 44, blonde, intense, with the kind of confidence that fills a room. Dad said she made him feel alive again. They dated for just 5 months before he proposed with my grandmother's ring. I'd met Simone maybe 4 times. When Dad told me they were getting married, I tried to be supportive. I wanted my father back. I wanted our craftsman-style house to feel like home again instead of a mausoleum filled with Mom's absence. But Simone had zero interest in being a mother figure. She wanted to erase every trace of Catherine Hammond and claim Gerald completely as her own. 2 weeks before their courthouse wedding, she moved in with 3 suitcases and an attitude that announced she was in charge now. Immediately, she began redecorating. Mom's landscape watercolors came down, replaced by stark black and white photography. The family photos disappeared into storage boxes. She repainted Mom's beloved sage green living room a cold charcoal gray. "We can't move forward while living in a museum," she told Dad when I protested. "You need to let go." Dad didn't fight her. He was so desperate to feel something besides pain that he surrendered every decision to Simone. Within 2 months, she'd established her regime of control. The rules came fast and without negotiation. Curfew, 8:30 on school nights, 9:30 on weekends, absurdly early for a 16-year-old. I needed written permission to visit friends. My phone was confiscated at 9 p.m. sharp every night. And the chores? God, the chores. I was responsible for all the laundry, dishes, vacuuming, bathroom cleaning, and yard work because teenagers need structure and accountability, Simone declared. Meanwhile, she contributed nothing except constant criticism. If I left a single glass in the sink, I'd lose my phone for 3 days. If I forgot to take the recycling bin to the curb, I was grounded for a week. Whenever I pushed back, she'd twist the story to Dad. "Claire was incredibly disrespectful today," she'd say with manufactured tears. "She called me names and refused to help around the house. I'm trying so hard, Gerald, but she despises me." Dad would confront me, already convinced of her version. "You need to give Simone a fair chance. She's trying to build a family here. She's trying to replace Mom." I'd shout back, "Your mother is gone, Claire. Simone is here now. You need to accept that." The emotional attacks escalated gradually. She'd make cutting remarks about my appearance while I ate breakfast. "Those jeans are getting snug, sweetie. Maybe you should skip the Pop-Tarts." Or, "That hairstyle doesn't do you any favors. Don't you want boys to notice you?" She'd compare me to other girls constantly. Simone's sister's daughter is your age and already has a modeling contract. What exactly are you doing with your life? Every minor mistake became grounds for punishment. I forgot to load the dishwasher one night. No phone for 10 days. I left my backpack in the hallway, grounded for 2 weeks. Dad never intervened. He'd become completely emotionally dependent on Simone, and she manipulated that dependence masterfully. If I complained, he'd accuse me of sabotaging his happiness. You're jealous, he'd snap. You can't stand seeing me happy again. That wasn't true. I just wanted someone who didn't make every day feel like walking through a minefield. Things turned physical the first time right after my 17th birthday. I came home 20 minutes past curfew because my friend Bridget's Honda broke down on the 91 freeway, and we had to wait for roadside assistance. I'd called to explain, but Simone dismissed my explanation like swatting away a fly. When I walked through the door, she was waiting in the entryway, arms crossed. You're late. I called. Bridget's car died on the freeway. I don't accept excuses. You deliberately broke the rules. It was 20 minutes, and it wasn't my fault. She slapped me hard across the face. My head snapped sideways, my cheek instantly burning. I stared at her in absolute shock, my hand rising to touch my stinging skin. You hit me, I whispered. And I'll do it again if you disrespect me, she hissed, grabbing my upper arm, her fingernails digging into my flesh like talons. You live in this house because I allow it. Don't you forget that. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, my whole body shaking. When Dad came home from his evening shift at the plant, I showed him the crescent-shaped nail marks on my arm and told him what happened. He barely glanced at them. What did you do to provoke her? I came home 20 minutes late because Bridget's car broke down. Simone said you were mouthy and defiant. She's trying to teach you respect. By hitting me. One slap isn't abuse, Claire. Stop being melodramatic. Apologize to Simone and this will blow over. I didn't apologize. It didn't blow over. Over the following year, the physical incidents multiplied. A shove against the wall here. A hair pull there. Always followed by Dad taking Simone's side without question. She'd grab my arm hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises that I'd photographed secretly on my phone. She'd yank my ponytail when she was angry, making my scalp scream. Once she hurled a ceramic coffee mug that shattered against the wall, missing my head by inches. I started wearing long-sleeved shirts even in scorching California summers to hide the marks. I stopped inviting Bridget over because I was ashamed. I counted down the calendar days until I turned 18 and could escape. My school counselor, Mr. Garrett Pierce, noticed something was wrong. He pulled me aside after I fell asleep in third period history for the 4th time in 2 weeks. Claire, are you all right? You seem exhausted and distracted lately. I wanted to tell him everything, every slap, every bruise, every verbal assault. But I was terrified. Terrified of what would happen if I reported Simone. Terrified Dad would choose her over me. Terrified of foster care or being sent to live with relatives I barely knew. I'm fine, I lied, avoiding his concerned gaze. Just stressed about SAT prep. Mr. Pierce didn't look convinced, but he couldn't force me to open up. The incident that shattered everything happened 2 months before my 18th birthday. It was a Friday evening in late March, and I'd asked permission to attend my friend Savannah's birthday party at her house in Corona. Dad said yes. Simone overruled him immediately. She has chores that need finishing, Simone announced. I finished them yesterday afternoon, I protested. Not to my standards. You'll redo everything and stay home. Something inside me snapped. Months of accumulated abuse, of being controlled, hurt, and diminished, erupted like a volcano. You're not my mother. You don't get to tell me what to do. Simone's face went dark, her eyes narrowing dangerously. What did you just say to me? I said you're not my mother. You never will be. You're just some woman my dad married who treats me like garbage. Dad, who'd been sitting on the sofa scrolling through his phone, stood up slowly. Claire, apologize immediately. No. She hits me, Dad. She hurts me constantly, and you let her do it. Simone walked toward me, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet whisper. You ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for you. You've done nothing but make my life hell. That's when she grabbed the chef's knife from the wooden block on the counter. I froze. Dad froze. You need to learn some respect, Simone said, advancing toward me with the 8-inch blade glinting under the kitchen lights. Simone, put the knife down, Dad said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty rather than authority. No. She needs to understand who this family belongs to. She needs to be marked so she never forgets her place. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might burst through my ribcage. Dad, do something. Please. But instead of stopping her, Dad grabbed me from behind. His hands closed around my wrists like steel handcuffs, and he dragged me forcibly toward the kitchen island. Dad, no. What are you doing? I screamed, thrashing wildly against his grip. Hold her still. Simone shrieked, the knife trembling in her raised hand. She needs to learn who this household belongs to. I fought against my father's grip with everything I had, but his hands were like iron vices around my wrists. Dad, please stop her. I begged, tears streaming down my face. You should have thought about that before you disrespected your stepmother, he said coldly, forcing my right forearm flat against the cold granite countertop. Simone pressed the serrated edge of the blade against my skin, her face twisted with rage and satisfaction. Now everyone will know you're marked by me. The pain was immediate and unbearable. She carved an S into my forearm, the knife cutting through skin as I screamed until my throat went raw. Blood welled up instantly, running down my arm in warm streams onto the granite. Dad held me down through all of it, his face completely blank, like he detached from reality. When Simone finished the S, she started on the C for her last name, Caldwell. I was sobbing, begging, trying to wrench myself free, but Dad's grip never loosened even slightly. Finally, she stepped back, admiring her bloody handiwork. 2 grotesque letters carved into my flesh. There, she said with disturbing satisfaction. Now everyone will know you belong to me. Dad released me and I collapsed onto the tile floor, clutching my mutilated, bleeding arm. The physical pain was excruciating, but the emotional agony was infinitely worse, the devastating realization that my own father had just helped someone permanently mutilate me. Clean that blood off my counter, Simone ordered, gesturing dismissively at the crimson streaks. And don't even think about going anywhere tonight. She walked calmly out of the kitchen like she'd just finished preparing dinner. Dad stood there for a long moment, looking down at me crumpled on the floor, and then he simply followed her without a word. I sat on that kitchen floor, blood soaking through my shirt sleeve, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had to escape. I wrapped my arm tightly in a dish towel and grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I could barely type through the tremors, but I texted my best friend Bridget. Emergency. Need help now. Can you come get me? She responded within seconds. OMW. Are you okay? No. Just hurry. Please. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When Bridget finally knocked on the door, I'd packed a duffel bag with clothes, documents, my laptop, and phone charger. I ran out before Dad or Simone could intercept me. In Bridget's car, she glanced over and saw my blood-soaked towel. She gasped sharply. Oh my God, Claire, what happened to your arm? My stepmother carved her initials into me. My dad held me down while she did it. Bridget's face went pale. We're going to the hospital right now. This is assault with a deadly weapon. At Riverside Community Hospital's emergency room, the staff took one look at my arm and immediately called the police. A nurse with kind eyes cleaned and bandaged the deep wounds, while a detective took my detailed statement. Detective Andrea Walsh was patient and compassionate, listening carefully as I described years of escalating abuse that had culminated in tonight's knife attack. "Your father physically restrained you while she did this?" she asked, taking meticulous notes. "Yes. He grabbed both my wrists and forced my arm flat on the counter." "And you're 17 years old?" "Yes. I turn 18 in 2 months. This constitutes child abuse and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. We are arresting both of them tonight." I felt simultaneous relief and terror. Relief that it was finally over. Terror about what came next. The police went to my house that night and arrested both Dad and Simone. They were charged with aggravated assault, child abuse, and unlawful restraint. Dad was additionally charged as an accomplice. I stayed with Bridget's family while the criminal case moved forward. Her parents, Helen and Robert, were incredibly supportive, treating me like their own daughter. "You're safe here for as long as you need," Helen told me, hugging me carefully to avoid my bandaged arm. The scarring on my arm was permanent and disfiguring. The S and C were raised, angry red welts, a constant reminder of their brutality. A plastic surgeon at the hospital said they might fade somewhat over years, but would never fully disappear. I'd carry their mark forever. The criminal case went to trial 8 months later. I had to testify, describing in excruciating detail what Simone and Dad had done. It was humiliating and re-traumatizing, reliving the worst moment of my life in front of a courtroom full of strangers. Simone's attorney tried desperately to paint me as a troubled, rebellious teenager who'd provoked the incident. My client was attempting to discipline a defiant child, and the situation escalated beyond her control, he argued. But the prosecution had overwhelming medical evidence, deep cuts deliberately spelling out initials, defensive wounds on my wrists from where Dad had restrained me, my testimony, and testimony from Bridget and her parents about my condition when I arrived at their house that night. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Simone was sentenced to 14 years in state prison. Dad, as an accomplice who'd physically restrained me but hadn't wielded the knife himself, received 10 years. At sentencing, the judge addressed them both with barely contained anger. "What you did to your daughter was barbaric and unforgivable. You branded her like livestock, permanently scarring her physically and psychologically. This court finds your actions utterly reprehensible." Dad looked directly at me during sentencing, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Claire, I'm so incredibly sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Please forgive me." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Simone showed absolutely no remorse. She glared at me with pure hatred, like this entire situation was somehow my fault, like I'd victimized her. After the sentencing, I tried to rebuild my shattered life piece by piece. I moved into a small studio apartment when I turned 18, working part-time at a Starbucks while finishing my senior year at Riverside High. I got accepted to UC Irvine with academic scholarships and financial aid. Therapy helped tremendously. My therapist, Dr. Naomi Winters, specialized in trauma and helped me process not just the attack itself, but years of accumulated abuse. "What they did wasn't your fault," she'd remind me every session. "Nothing you did or said justified that response." I understood that intellectually, but emotionally I still battled guilt and shame. The scars on my arm were a constant, visible reminder. People would stare, ask intrusive questions. I usually said it was from a car accident because explaining the horrific truth was too painful. But gradually, over time, I reclaimed the narrative. The scars became a symbol of survival rather than victimhood. I'd survived something unspeakable and emerged on the other side. Dad wrote me letters from California State Prison. Long, rambling apologies about how Simone had manipulated him, how he'd lost himself after Mom died, how he'd catastrophically failed me as a father. I didn't read most of them. Dr. Winters said I didn't owe him forgiveness, and I wholeheartedly agreed. 3 years into his sentence, Dad's attorney contacted me. Dad wanted to meet face-to-face to apologize. I thought about it for weeks, weighing the options. Part of me wanted closure. Part of me wanted to tell him exactly how much he destroyed. I agreed to one supervised, time-limited meeting at the prison. Seeing him was surreal. He looked older, greyer, diminished. Prison had broken him down. "Claire," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from him at the metal table, arms crossed defensively. "I'm not here to forgive you. I know. I just needed you to know how sorry I am. What I did, what we did, there's no excuse. I failed you catastrophically as a father. I let that woman poison my mind, and I hurt you in the most unforgivable way possible. You held me down while she carved her initials into my skin," I said flatly. "You chose her over me, your own daughter. I know, and I'll carry that guilt until the day I die." Tears streamed down his face. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I love you, and that I completely understand if you never want to see me again." I looked at him for a long moment. "I needed you to protect me. That was your fundamental job as my father. And when it mattered most, you didn't just fail to protect me, you actively helped hurt me. That's not something I can ever forgive." "I understand," he whispered. "I'm glad you're sorry," I continued, my voice steady. "I hope that helps you somehow. But it doesn't help me. The damage is permanent." I left after 25 minutes. It was the last time I ever saw him. Simone never apologized or showed any remorse. She maintained that I deserved discipline and that things had simply gone too far. She filed multiple appeals over the years, all denied. 5 years after the attack, I graduated from UC Irvine with a degree in social work. I wanted to help other kids trapped in abusive situations, to be the advocate I desperately needed. I work now for a non-profit organization in Orange County that supports youth aging out of foster care and escaping abusive homes. My scars, both the visible ones on my arm and the invisible ones in my mind, inform my work every single day. People sometimes ask if I regret reporting my father and stepmother to the police. The answer is absolutely not. Reporting them saved my life. If I'd stayed silent, the abuse would have continued and likely escalated even further. Who knows what they would have done next? My dad was released early on good behavior last year after serving 8 years. He's tried multiple times to contact me through mutual acquaintances and distant relatives, but I've made it crystal clear I'm not interested in any relationship. He made his choices. He chose Simone over me. He chose to hold me down while she mutilated me. Those choices have permanent consequences. And one consequence is that he doesn't get to be part of my life, ever. Simone still has several years remaining on her sentence. I hope she serves every single day. The scars on my arm have faded slightly over the years, but they're still clearly visible, 2 raised letters that tell a story. I considered tattoo cover-ups, laser removal, or surgical revision. But eventually I decided against all of it. These scars are part of my story now. They remind me of what I survived and how strong I had to become. They remind me that I'm a survivor, not a victim. I'm 22 now, building a life I'm genuinely proud of. I have friends who love and support me unconditionally. I have a career that fulfills me and gives me purpose. I have a future that belongs entirely to me. My father and stepmother tried to break me. They tried to brand me as property, to mark me permanently as theirs. But I'm not theirs. I never was. I'm mine. And these scars prove I survived them. So I'll ask you this. If your parent helped someone physically assault and permanently scar you, would you ever be able to forgive them? Or is that a betrayal too deep, too fundamental, to ever overcome? How do you move forward when the people who were supposed to protect you become the ones who hurt you most? I found my answer. I moved forward by choosing myself, by refusing to let them define me, by turning my pain into purpose. These scars on my arm? They're not a mark of ownership. They're a testament to survival. And I wear them as proof that I'm still here, still fighting, still growing, still becoming exactly who I was meant to be.